Well, hello and welcome to the 23rd edition of IREX 2025. And this panel discussion is on EB5 Demystified from Investment to Residency. So quickly, I'm going to introduce the panelists. To begin with, we have Mr. Matt Hogan, CMB Regional Centers. Mr. Akshat Gupta, he's from the US Immigration Fund. Abhishek Singh is from EB5 United. Rhea Nundy is from EB5 Capital. Rishabh Gandhi is from Civitas Capital Group, and we have Rohit Turkhud from the CSG Law. It's really a pleasure to have you all. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Abhishek, I'm going to begin with you, I think, to start with a very basic question, which our viewers would want to know, what the audience would want to know here is that why should Indian investors be considering the EB5 visa program over other US immigration options, specifically for permanent residency?
Very good question. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for getting me over here. Feels good. There's so many reasons. Number one is it's a direct path to get permanent residency. Number two, there's no dependency. You do not depend on anyone, neither on your employer nor anybody from the family to sponsor you. And the third one and the biggest one is, it is one of the fastest ways to get to permanent residency. If you'll compare it with other visa categories, which can lead to permanent residencies. When you talk about people living in the US on different visas, and if they are looking to get permanent residencies, it gives them an immense opportunity to actually apply concurrently and get EAD and advanced parole in near about 2 to 6 months from the day they file the petition. Now, EAD gives you the power to hop jobs, stay in the US without working, or start your own business. Basically, your presence in the US is not tied up to your employment anymore. Plus, advanced parole gives you the power to travel in and out of the US without any hassle. So technically, you start enjoying the benefits of a green card within months of filing the petition. So that can happen if you file concurrently. When you talk about students, a major chunk of the investors, the parents think about it and the students plan their future in the US. So it gives them freedom. If parents who are looking to send their children to the US, and if they can plan it well, then these students can qualify for in-state, and they can have major discounts on their tuition fees. So, and on top of that, if you are studying over there and you have gotten through this particular process and you have your EAD, then you can do anything. You don't need to do something which is related to your major. So your dependency on OPT goes completely. It is a now, yeah, there are things in this which makes it a bit complex, but there are specialists sitting over here, and you will hire people around you for this particular petition, which will make things simpler for you. But the actual need is that you come up with clean money, which can be traced, and you file your EB5 petition, which covers an entire family, husband, wife, and children below 21 years of age. So it's a wonderful program to get into.
Now that you've told us the benefits, and of course, like you're all rightly are experts, and that's why the panel is called, demystifying, everything about EB5. Matt, now that we know the benefits of having the EB5 visa, what are the key eligibility and investment requirements to qualify under the EB5 program today?
Is it working?
Yes,
I think so. So the minimum investment threshold for an EB5 investment is $1,050,000 US. However, that investment amount can be reduced to $800,000 US if the investment takes place in what's referred to as a targeted employment area. And right now there are 3 different categories that qualify as target employment areas. Those are projects in rural areas, projects in high unemployment areas, and then also projects that are focused on infrastructure. So infrastructure projects whereby the administrator of the EB5 investment, the funds themselves, is a public entity, a government entity. When we talk about qualifications for an EB5 investor, that minimum investment threshold, that's obviously the biggest one. The investment itself is a family-based investment, right? So the applicant gets their visa, but so does their spouse and any children under the age of 21. So in that sense, you're looking at a program that can be one investment threshold for the entire family. You can get everybody in. As Abhishek mentioned, you're not required to rely upon sponsorship from family, sponsorship by a company, and it provides obviously unique advantages as opposed to programs like the H-1B program.
Okay, Great, thanks for explaining that really well. Rhea, I want to come to you first because we're talking about regional centers and you all are the experts here. What specific role does a regional center play in helping, investors identify structure and also monitor the investments?
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for that question. So basically, most of us on this panel here work with companies that hold regional center licenses. So regional centers essentially like a license that most of us and our companies hold to be able to raise funds across the US and in EB5 funds across the US. So basically, regional centers and companies like ourselves, we basically work with developers, we collaborate with the developers and see what kind of projects they are building across the US. It could be multifamily residentials, it could be hotels, office rentals, and regional centers like ourselves basically collaborate with them, help them raise funds for their projects, and thereby investors receive their green cards through those investments in these particular developments that are happening across the US. Now, the companies like us also see and monitor these projects across the tenure of the project, which is anywhere between 3 to 5 years. We see that the project is able to basically raise funds also from like a third party, like a bank, see that the jobs are being created, which is very important for, basically in EB5, unless the jobs are created, investors will not get their green cards. So we monitor that entire asset for 3 to 5 years and see all these things are met so that basically investors get their green cards eventually. So that is what a regional center basically does in this entire process of EB5.
They play a very crucial role, obviously. Akshat, that's why what I want to ask you, what makes, since Rhea was mentioning, about the projects, the tenure, so what really makes a project bankable? Let me ask you in simple words, whether it's the investment, whether it's the immigration, what makes a project strong as well as bankable where an investor would really put in that money?
Sure. I think there are various aspects to it. I think first it starts with who is the developer on the project, right? Does that person have enough experience in the world of real estate first? Second, has the developer done past EB5 projects? Have they been a success? Have they been a failure? Have they been a challenge? Then you obviously come and look at the specifics of that project. So you look at, okay, what asset class is it? Is it a retail project? Is it a condo project? Is it a multifamily? Then you step closer and you see what is the location of the project, right? Just because it's a multifamily doesn't mean it's going to be successful in any part of the US until and unless there's a demand for that asset class in that area. Then you dig deeper and then you see, okay, what is the cap stack? What is the capital stack? Which means how has the project been structured? What position is EB5 investors in? Are they in the senior loan position? Are they in the preferred equity or mezzanine debt position? How much of the developer's equity is in the project, which is how much is the developer's skin in the game, right? How much inclined is he to ensure that this project is a success in order for investors to ultimately achieve their objective. And then from an immigration standpoint, you look at something most importantly as basic as job creation. So we as regional centers hire third-party experts which are PhD in economics. These people obviously do an independent research and prepare a study which is submitted in the I-956F application of any project, where we sort of project what are the total number of jobs that are going to be created. And in any project, you'd like to at least have like a 15 to 20% buffer when it comes to job creation, so that in the event or scenario, again, a 0.001%, the entire project doesn't get complete. It shouldn't be neck to neck. It shouldn't be like you needed 10 jobs, you're only creating 10 jobs, right? Yeah. So I would say these are a few factors that need to be considerably kept in mind while you're looking at a project, and that is what makes a project a good or a bad one.
Okay, and also from the investment. Sure, Abhishek.
Well said, Akshat. Wonderful. Just to add one more point to that, investors should always also look at the exit strategy. Every project has a different exit strategy. The smoother the exit strategy is, the realistic the exit strategy is, gets you your money back. It has to be a win-win situation for everyone. That's what will get you your money back. Because in EB5 world, two things that are very important, and that's what you should focus on. Number one, that you get your green card without any hassle, which he spoke about. And the second thing is that you should get your capital back. So exit strategy of any project is very, very important to be looked at.
Okay, great. Thanks for adding that point as well to what Akshat had said. Rishabh, I want to ask you here, when we talk about the new, set-aside visa categories, whether it's high unemployment, it's rural, infrastructure, benefit Indian investors specifically, particularly in terms of faster processing, and also something I think which is a concern for everybody is the reduced backlog.
Yes, so luckily, post the 2022 Reform and Integrity Act, they came up with this, new categories, and like Matt highlighted, you've got HUA, we've got rural, we've got infrastructure, with different visa set-aside categories. In terms of the fastest, per the Reform and Integrity Act is, they have a priority processing for rural, but, I was just at the conference hall and, I was speaking to one of our colleagues and he said that they've got an HUA approval now in 6 months as well, right? So it's really a black box, that goes into processing, but yeah, in terms of the majority, we are seeing the fastest approval across rural projects.
Okay, so it's good to hear that, but I now want to come to Rohit from the legal aspect, Rohit. So, you really are the expert here. Could you walk each one of us, through the various key legal stages from the initial contribution to the conditional and then, of course, permanent green card approval, specifically, of course, for the EB5?
Thank you, Ambika. First of all, I'd like to thank IREX for allowing me the privilege and the pleasure of being here, and for all of you for attending this. I happen to be in the minority on this panel. I'm the only licensed attorney. I'm the only one who's not licensed to give any financial advice to anybody. I'm also the only one licensed to say that the only way you can get a green card faster than EB5 is through marriage to an American citizen, as long as that marriage is a real marriage. If it's not a real marriage, you're making the worst mistake of your life. Okay.
So the best tip for the day, yeah?
Absolutely. Okay, so, you start out by talking to regional centers who are all very well represented over here. They are among the creme de la creme of over 500 regional centers today in the US. I've been very privileged to work with pretty much every single one of them at some point in time or the other. So you start by talking to them and finding out about their projects. You start by talking to an attorney of your choice or multiple attorneys before you decide who you want to work with, and get a sense of what's required. Your most important job of your immigration attorney is to work with you for your source of funds, because you have to be able to establish where the monies are coming from. Let's assume that you've selected your project, you've selected the immigration attorney to work with. When those two things come together, you can file your EB5 application. Just like Rishabh just said, there are different timelines for processing of different applications. There is no set timeline. The immigration does not believe in a first in, first out, so you can get some things approved quickly through sheer luck. Once that is approved, then you'll go through the regular process, either of working with the immigration service in the US or of working with the US consulate in Mumbai if you're from India. You're then going to get a conditional green card, which is valid for a period of 2 years. During the last 90 days of that conditional green card process, you will file another application to remove the conditions. That can take anywhere from a year to 4 years. You also have to remember that once you file that application to remove the conditional application and you get a receipt, that receipt actually extends your conditional green card for a period of 4 years. So you continue to maintain your residence. Provided you fulfill all your conditions, after you get your permanent green card, you could qualify for US citizenship. Not necessary that you become a US citizen. It's always safer, especially in today's immigration environment, to become a US citizen. And hopefully that's the goal for most people. But many people are happy with the green card and can live with the green card for the rest of their lives. That's perfectly fine.
You did speak about finances, and my next question to you here is about, how do you verify as well as document the lawful source, especially if somebody has complex assets?
Thank you. The most critical part of your EB5 application, because that's what's going to decide whether your application can be approved or not. If you invested in any one of these regional center projects sitting on this panel over here, you probably will get an approval so far as the project side is concerned, which is briefly called a 956F approval. If you have that approval, in all likelihood, the project side is approved. Well, that's what it means. It also means in all likelihood, you will get your green card, because that means job creation will hopefully be completed. By the way, the one word that you don't ever want to use in the EB5 space is the word guarantee. It does not exist. If you do keep using that word, just try and get it out of your system, because that's not going to work. Okay. Then you're basically, just like in the real estate industry, one would focus, and the mantra over there would be location, location, location. In the EB5 space, your mantra should be documentation, 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 especially when it relates to the source of funds. You may have complicated assets, and that's why you want to work with an attorney who's got experience in EB5, usually particular to your culture, particular to your country, know the guidelines, and get a sense for how are you going to document it. You are by law required to provide a minimum of 7 years of tax returns. In the Indian context, I usually suffice with the acknowledgement sheet or the first page of the tax returns. They're also required to submit 3 years of bank statements. I don't mean 3 years of bank statements just dumped on your attorney's desk and said, okay, now submit that to the immigration. You do need to identify the transactions that will relate to EB5. My comments right now are pretty simplistic. They are far more complicated than that, and that's where you do need to work closely with your attorney, whether it's documenting the different kind of assets that you might be using to fund your EB5.
So documenting, of course, like you said, you've really specified that is very, very critical. Yep.
That's the one takeaway from my comments.
Okay, so
Yep.
coming back, I think, Rhea, I want to ask you, what should investors be looking at when they're investing in a project? When it's safety, credibility, what are those key takeaways for an investor here?
Sure. So basically, there are a few factors that you should consider when you're looking at the investment part of your EB5 process. Firstly, if you're using the regional center pathway, you see that how long the regional center has been operating in the industry. See how many projects they've done, what kind of projects they've done, how much money have they raised, how much money have they been able to successfully repay. See that how many investors have been a part of, in the journey of EB5, how many investors have used this regional center and have eventually received their green card and completed the entire process of not just receiving the green card, but also eventually receiving their funds, the $800,000 that they have invested. Secondly, when you're looking at any individual projects also, you see that when you're looking at the capital stack of that project, you firstly see that the developer that the regional center is working with at least has a good idea about EB5, because this is not any other process. This process involves immigration. So being able to show job creation is very, very important. Being able to, also have another party involved in that project, which is like a bank, who is also putting in their money in the capital stack along with the developer and the EB5 funds. So it at least shows that there are two levels of due diligence done, not just by the regional center, but by another entity as well. Then, of course, see that the developer that is doing this project is putting enough of their funds as well, so that tomorrow you know that there's enough skin in the game for the developers as well, so that they are eventually completing the project and returning the funds back to the investors. So these are few important factors to consider when you're looking at a regional center, when you're looking at a project. So yeah.
Okay, now that we know those factors, and of course Rohit has spoken from the legal aspect, but coming to you, Matt, I want to ask financial as well as legal due diligence steps, what you would like to suggest that investors should be taking when they're actually,
committing or putting that money on a specific project? From a regional center
From a regional
perspective,
center perspective,
So-
yeah. Both financial as well as legal.
And this is critical. So one of the gentlemen up here earlier mentioned that there are regional centers in the industry that might only have 2 or 3 people a part of their entire company. And although it's not impossible for a small regional center to be able to structure a quality EB5 investment opportunity, you need to know what qualifications that regional center actually has to be able to underwrite and structure these projects, both as we're talking about here from a financial and from a legal perspective. They need to have people on staff, or they need to be working with consultants who can conduct that due diligence, who can look at all of the financial models, who can do the underwriting on all of the project documentation that a bank would do. You need to be underwriting these projects similarly to a bank, stress testing these models, trying to figure out where you need protections added in to further support the project and ensure that the project can be successful. And then, just as importantly, once you've identified those things, you need to be able to document those things. You need to have the right legal counsel. Now, this is not the work of a typical immigration attorney. That person's focused on your personal EB5 journey. What we're talking about here is the regional center and the work that they do that goes into underwriting the project and structuring it before the investor ever even sees it. CMB is unique. We have about 70 employees. We have 5 in-house attorneys. We have our own in-house economists. We have a project development team that focuses on EB5 documentation and initial underwriting. But then we also have a finance team that focuses on all of this financial underwriting. And to get a project from start to finish, it takes that entire team. So you have to have contributions from each and every one of those people. It then culminates with your legal team working alongside your project development and finance team to document that loan agreement, put the proper protections in place. And depending on where you sit in a capital structure, that can be very different. If you're a first lien lender, you're usually talking about collateralizing the project with a deed of trust on the property. If you're subordinated debt, you're either talking about a pledge of membership or ownership interest. You might be talking about distributions pledges or structuring with some sort of equity commitment or profits participation interest in a project if you're further subordinated in the capital structure. But you have to have the people on staff that are sophisticated enough to understand this. And when you're doing your due diligence, ask the regional centers about these things. Meet the people. Come to our office. You know, we have 2 offices, one in Texas, one in Illinois. We take visitors to those offices all the time to be able to meet our staff, get to talk to our people about our projects, and understand what we do with each and every one of these.
So clearly, I mean, do your homework and do the research and
Absolutely.
ask the very, very important questions here.
Absolutely.
You know, Akshat, I want to ask you about timelines. We've spoken about due diligence, we've spoken about the benefits, and so much more, of course, you know. But I want to ask you about timelines because that's something which everybody wants to know. Specifically, you know, from the I-526E filing to conditional, and then finally the permanent green card.
Yeah.
Especially, again, for the Indian.
Yeah, so I think Rohit answered that a while ago in terms of transcending from your I-526E to an IA-29 once you apply for the IA-29 petition and request the government to remove the condition. So I think that's something that Rohit has covered. But in terms of just our general understanding of how USCIS processing timelines have been, we've seen approvals in rural projects as early as 6 months as well. But having said that, we do try and give a pessimistic timeline of between 6 months to 12 months. I think that's realistic. It's obviously good to see the government approving petitions sooner. But again, I think it's our responsibility to let people know about average timelines. When you look at an HUA project, again, as Rishabh mentioned, it's a delight to hear, you know, petitions getting approved in 6 months. But again, I would say keeping 2 years in mind would be an average timeline. If you do get approved quicker, great. But then, you know, average timelines would hover around 1 to 2 years at least in an HUA project. With infrastructure projects, obviously, they are yet untapped, and we are going to see their progress and growth and potential very soon. We're coming up with a few infrastructure projects in 2026, so we're excited to see how that unfolds. But again, we're looking at hopefully somewhere between 6 months to a year in terms of processing timelines, even with infrastructure projects.
Okay, so when you've spoken about timelines, is something I think, you know, people are apprehensive about is denials. And that's what, Rishabh, I want to ask you. You know, the reasons for denial, you know, when an EB5 visa is denied, and also, you know, there's also something called the request for evidence. So, I mean, obviously it's a technical word, so I got a little stuck on that. So how does one overcome that, or, you know, to make sure that an investor doesn't have to go through that or be denied?
Yeah, I think, you know, like Rohit said, you know, the instrument to EB5 is, you know, all the regional centers on this panel, you know, we've got projects approved by the USCIS, right? So the chances of getting a denial because of the projects are very, very, very rare. Of course, there have been, project-related denials in the past. But when it comes to the source of funds side, I think the only way USCIS gets to clarify any doubts in the source of fund is by issuing an RFE. So as long as you're working with a good attorney, I don't think investors should be scared of an RFE. Like, I'm sure, everybody is trying to use, the legitimate funds. Some may not have the documents to prove that, these funds are legitimate because they may date back to 20, 30 years. And, we have a record-keeping habit of 7 to 10 years, right? So if you're working with a good attorney and you're completely transparent with them from the very start, I don't think these RFEs should matter a lot.
So clearly going back to funds, and Rohit, that's what I want to ask you. What are some of the challenges or structural challenges that Indian investors face when it comes to, explaining the source of funds, like even Rishabh mentioned?
Thank you. First, I just wanted to mention, I know we've thrown around this terminology a little bit over here, capital stack, capital structure. Just wanted to explain what it means at a very high level. It's essentially just talking about who's lending the money in what proportions for the entire project. So let's say if it's a $100 million project. You're trying to figure out, okay, is there bank lending? How much is the bank lending? At a very simplistic level, you'll have the bank, you'll have the EB5 investors, and then you'll have the developer. So just remember, that's what it essentially comes down to. Matt has talked about different structuring, and those get pretty complicated, and you certainly want to try and understand them. But I think it's important to understand what is a capital stack. It's just comprising the amount of monies that are being loaned by different people to the project, okay? Sorry, coming back to your question, Ambika, the source of funds is always the challenge. Working with Indian investors, 99% of my hundreds of investors are born in India. I'm myself born in Bombay, so I certainly understand our Indian culture. The first answer you will get is, oh, I don't have these, I cannot get them. I'm a bit more persistent, having grown up over here. And that cannot get it does turn into a can get it when you tell them that, listen, if you don't get it, you're not getting your green card. It's a question of just explaining to the investor, even something as simple as a birth certificate. The first thing they'll say, nahi hai, nahi milega. And you know that that answer is a pretty convenient answer to get out of doing what is necessary. Please understand, if you're doing the EB5, it's incumbent on you. It's your responsibility to provide the documents. If you don't provide the documents and the attorney proceeds without it, you're getting a denial. Just because it comes to the attorney's name doesn't mean the attorney's case is denied. It's your case that's denied. So please understand, it's really important to work with your attorney proactively, as carefully as possible. Don't complain when you're being asked for documents. It's like taking a bitter pill. It's meant for you. It's meant for your benefit, okay? So that's important. Again, documentation becomes the biggest challenge for investors, and the older the investment is, the more difficult it becomes. I'm going to give you a really simple example. Let's say that you have an FD that's maturing today. However, to get to this FD, there were 10 other FDs that matured over a period of time and were rolled over. Technically, you should be able to go back to providing that first bank entry which opened your first FD and then trace the rollovers to each stage till you reach the present FD maturity. It's a lot of work. It's very challenging, no question about it. But you want a green card. You want that approval. And you've just invested over $800,000. Isn't that worth it? I mean, I'd be really shocked if anybody gives me an answer and says, it's not worth my trouble. But that's the kind of work that you need to put into it. That's the kind of work your attorney should be putting into it. Again, back to documentation, documentation, documentation. Of course, the easiest source of funds is if you went out and won a lottery. That'd be great. But you'd still have to show where that dollar came from to buy it. So those are the big challenges.
Okay, thank you again, for putting out the challenges. But Matt, I want to ask you, again, coming back to the regional centers and, for the investors, how can the investors be sure that the capital remains compliant through their entire investment period? How can they ensure that?
Sure. So a couple important things, and I think probably what you're referring to is how do you make sure that the capital stays at risk within the project to meet the requirements of the USCIS? So before 2022, the program required that an investor make their investment and that their capital remain at risk through the end of their 2-year conditional residency period. And that was a period that would start after you actually receive your conditional visa, which allows you to enter the country. And sometimes that process would get delayed, or there'd be backlogs, backlogs in adjudications, and so that whole process would stretch out, and sometimes it would exceed the length of the initial EB5 loan. So most EB5 loans that are structured might be 5 or 6 years. If the loan would get repaid at 5, but you weren't through that process, you hadn't completed that period, the regional center would have to reinvest the money on your behalf into another at-risk investment, which obviously exposes investors to exponential risk because it may have to happen multiple times. And you may not necessarily know or have much control over what project the regional center would choose to invest in. You'd have to make sure you really were careful in picking a quality EB5 regional center that was capable of making these decisions and could show you their track record in doing so over a long period of time. Fortunately, post 2022, with the EB5 Reform and Integrity Act, they've changed the sustainment requirements. So now an investor just needs to keep their capital invested for no less than 2 years. Now, that doesn't eliminate redeployment, and this is important. It means you, again, have to keep it invested for 2 years. So if you're being pushed to go into a project where the regional center or the developer is saying, ooh, we're gonna repay you right at the end of the 2 years, we're gonna make sure you get your money back right away, you better make sure that timeline lines up with your investment. If the developer repays before you've completed your 2-year period, again, the regional center is going to have to redeploy on your behalf. And part of what I'm going to say next does go in line and kind of fits in connection with what Rohit has been talking about. The importance of documentation from a USCIS perspective is critical, in particular now. The administration has really tightened its adjudication standards and is really looking at every single piece of an investor's investment. Then they're also looking at every piece of how the project not only is planned to operate, but how it does operate over time. So they're going to heavily scrutinize your entire process at the point in time in which you have your conditions removed on your 829. So if that money came back a little early and you didn't reinvest it into something at risk, or you didn't do that properly, they're going to scrutinize that. And so all of these things are really important.
So it's even more critical now, like you rightly said. Yeah, things are tougher.
Yeah, making sure that you're compliant is even more critical. Working with a quality and experienced immigration attorney like Rohit is critical for your process. You shouldn't be overly concerned about redeployment right now, because the reality is most projects are going to take a lot longer than 2 years to go through their entire process. But it, as I mentioned, it doesn't eliminate that. So it is something that you should still probably talk to the regional center about.
Great, but since we have all the experts, you want to add something?
Rohit wanted to add something, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
I saw.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify what Matt just said, and he's absolutely right. Under the new law, the money needs to be kept at risk for only 2 years. However, there are lawsuits pending out there because it's not very clear when the 2-year period starts. It's not very clear when the 2-year period ends. And the USCIS loves to give you zero clarity, which means you're going to be up there. According to me, you must get into this expecting to keep your money at risk for somewhere between 5 to 7 years. If you're expecting to get it back in 5 to 7 years and you get it back sooner, I'm pretty sure there's nobody in this room who's going to complain. But if your expectation is that I'm getting my money back in 2 years or thereabouts, and you don't get it back to 5 to 7, that could upset a lot of your life plans. So you do need to be careful. Your expectations are very important. And hopefully you've gathered from all of us that timelines are not written in stone. They're not important for the Immigration Service. There is no first in, first out. You're going to get your application done when it's done.
think that's a very, very valid point because you don't know when those 2 years are beginning or ending. But now, the piece of advice, I think from all the experts here when it comes to regional centers, what would you like to tell, somebody who's applying or a first-time investor for EB5 visas, specifically 2025? What should they keep in mind?
So I've been saying this post-IRA, that this is the first time we have a solid program for 5 years. And now it becomes more important because the program is grandfathered till 30th of September 2026. So for anybody who's born in India, that's not the date that you should be looking at, that I have time to file till then. But it is very important to understand the day you file your petition is your position in the ever-forming queue, in whatever category you file. So, and that is an ever-forming queue. The queue is pretty long. So, with retrogression knocking on the door, if not there already, then it is very, very critical that you take a decision. I always tell my clients that there are 2 phases in your EB5 petition journey. You start researching and you try to come to a decision whether I should be going for it or not. I have never sold EB5. I'm doing this since a long time, but I have never sold EB5 program to anybody. You need to have a need for that. If you recognize that I need a green card, either for the entire family or for my children, it can be any reason. It's personal to you. And you have decided that I'm going to go ahead with EB5. Do not sit on it. Take a decision, move forward. Because waiting for EB5, it's not going to make it cheaper or faster. It's going to make the wait longer and longer. So that's what I would.
Need is key. And again, like you said, the queue is only getting longer. So everybody needs to make up their mind faster if the need is there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
EB5 is a product for which you need to have a need for it. We can give you the best possible services, the best possible projects. We can structure that for you. You asked a question like, what is the role of a regional center? In one line, I can say that as per the law, your money has to be at risk. It is the role of a regional center, essentially the NCE manager, to mitigate that risk as much as possible.
Yeah.
So the thing is, that is our job. We can do that for you. But what are you going to do with the green card? That is something that you will have to decide.
Yeah.
Sometimes people ask me that, okay, fine, I'll get a green card, but why I'm going to do that? I'm like, I'm doing this for more than a decade, but I never met a client who did not have a plan for the coming 10 to 15 years.
Absolutely,
what they're going to do with
I think
if you do not have that particular plan, that means you do not need to file for EB5. So if you need a green card, if you have decided that you're going to go for EB5, do not sit on it, do not wait, take an action.
Okay, Akshat, the piece of advice you would like to give the investors who want to apply for the EB5 visa?
I would just sort of echo the same sentiment as Abhishek. I would say the journey starts with you interacting with a set of regional centers and great attorneys like Rohit. I think this interaction happens simultaneously rather than it happening in isolation. So bit by bit, you will uncover pieces of information. You'll learn more about EB5 and what are the complications involved in the program. Yet at the same time, positives about the program each day. As Abhishek said, if you are looking at EB5, you should go for it as soon as possible. At the same time, not make a rushed decision which you might regret in the future. A holistic approach or a holistic, I would say, feedback or guidance on this is provided by both parties. So I would sincerely suggest people to stay in touch with their attorneys and at the same time look for prospective EB5 projects simultaneously.
Great. And anything you would like to add, Rishabh? I'll come back to you, Abhishek.
Yeah, I think, this is a medium to long-term planning. So I think that's why my colleagues are saying that, it's not like you start today and you get a green card tomorrow. And of course, this is a queue and, it would only keep increasing because of, all the immigration challenges that a lot of Indians are now facing in the US, specifically with the new president, right? And things are changing. This is grandfathered, but, that's not the date that anybody should be targeting. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I missed on one point. The one point is that, as Rohit said, as Matt said, as everyone said, that documentation, your source of funds is going to be the most important. It's going to be the spine of your petition. Hire an attorney, not thinking from a transactional point of view. This is more like a service that you're going to get for quite some over long 4 to 5, 6 years of time that you will need the services of an attorney. The attorney is going to be the most important person in your life. So whatever I said before that you need to take an action as soon as possible, that is after doing all the due diligence that we have spoken for an hour over here. If you have done that, you are in a position that you can take a step ahead and move to the next level, then don't sit on it.
So, okay, first the need, and then the due diligence, do your research, and of course, then you go to the attorney and take the decision.
Absolutely.
I just want to say that a shout out to all the attorneys and obviously Rohit sitting here, and I completely agree that immigration attorneys are actually the backbone of your EB5 petition. So you should comply with what they ask you to do, you should speak to them, you should listen to them. And they are probably the people who are you going to be in most interaction with during your investment journey.
So Rohit, you're in minority, but I think they all have something to say. But I'm going to come to you for the closing remarks. I just want to ask Rhea if she wants to add or give a piece of advice to the investors who are looking at the EB5. Anything you would like to add to what your colleagues have said?
I mean, the same thing that everybody on the panel just mentioned, make your attorney your best friend. They're going to be there throughout the entire journey of your EB5. So listen to them. Give them the documentations that they require, and also, like they all mentioned, that if there is a need, act upon it. EB5 also happens to be one of the fastest way that you get your green card apart from marriage. So act upon it as soon as...
So a lot of people are thinking of the marriage point. Matt, would you like to add anything as a piece of advice or something you would like to mention?
One of the things that I think is going to be significant in the industry, we've talked about it, is this grandfathering provision. And investors are going to have their petitions grandfathered in if they invest before September 30th of next year. And what you're going to see in this industry is an unbelievable race, huge competition within this industry between now and September 30th of next year. And there's going to be a lot of marketing. There's going to be a lot of mismessaging. There's going to be a lot of poor marketing, negative marketing. Be careful. Don't get sucked into the trends. Don't get overly focused on rule versus HUA. Don't get overly focused on things that are just fads or trends in the industry. Be careful. Do not, if something's too good to be true, it's probably not a very good project. Don't get sucked into gimmicks. Don't get sucked into new ways to try and outsmart USCIS, because you're not going to outsmart USCIS. There should be a flight to quality. Make sure you're working with a quality regional center, a quality immigration attorney, and that you've picked a very good project. The last thing I'll say is that you also have to be focused on what these groups are saying. These groups, there's a lot of great EB5 regional centers in this industry. Are they selling their project, or are they selling against somebody else? If they're selling against somebody else and they're giving you a bunch of negative marketing, they probably don't have a lot of great things to say about their own projects. So be careful with that too.
Yeah,
look for these groups that have high integrity.
So that's really, I think, an important word of caution. Yes, sure, Rhea. She wanted to just add something, and then Rohit, I have a final question for you.
So I just wanted to add on to what Matt was just mentioning. It's obviously, there's a very limited time now before EB5 halts unless, there's a reauthorization of the act. So at this point, there's a very high possibility that regional centers will use multiple gimmicks to attract more and more investors. And I think one of the red flags that any investor should look at is if there's a regional center that's providing something absolutely different from what the rest of the industry is providing. Like, for example, a very high rate of return. In EB5, the rate of return essentially is just the opportunity cost of your green card. So the rate of return is really, really low. And anybody, providing high rate of return than most other regional centers in the industry just shows that there's something somewhere that you should look at into the documentations and find out why they needed to do something so different from the industry in order to get more and more investors. So you need to look at the documentations of projects really closely before you make these decisions with such a huge amount of money. It's your $800,000 is not a small amount. So,
well, thank you all so much for that very valuable advice for the investors. Rohit, I want to ask you, lastly, how do you coordinate with project developers and regional centers to ensure compliance and smooth petition processing as well?
Thanks for that question. So first of all, it feels really good to be in the minority out here. Apart from feeling quite exclusive about it, I think all of you have heard some wonderful information from every one of the speakers, and do pay attention to that. It's really critical. Like I said earlier, I've been very blessed to work with the best of the regional centers. So we know that the quality of their documentation is excellent. We know the quality of their documentation is going to be approved by the Immigration Service. Again, like I said right in the beginning, I do not give financial advice because that's not what I'm licensed to do. But it is important to see the track record of the regional center. Even if the regional center has a great track record, maybe that specific project may not be a winner in your opinion or in your decision making. You gotta think about all of that. The last thing I will say is that it's really important, and Akshat referred to that, and as did Matt and the others, this is not a transaction. This is going to be a relationship. And the strongest relationship, or the most in-depth relationship you're going to have through the next 5 to 7 years is going to be with your immigration attorney. The projects will talk to you. You will invest in the projects. They will send you your annual, to be permitted to say, measly check for your interest at 0.25% interest, but you are going to be constantly working with the immigration attorney through your immigration issues, whether it's work-related, whether it's travel-related. So it is really, really important that you be comfortable with the attorney you're going to work with for the next 5 to 7 years. So that's my important takeaway.
Great. Now
Sorry.
the floor, yeah.
One last line. Everyone's talking about return of investment over here. According to me, if you'll ask me, the actual return of investment is going to be a green card. And trust me, guys, for a lot of people on this earth, that's the most valuable thing. So think about it that way.
Okay, so now the floor is open for questions. Please go ahead. And you could ask if you have a specific question for a panelist, you could go, otherwise you could keep it open. Could we please hand over the mic? Thank you so much.
Hello. Hello, can you? Matt, this is Seiko. My question is to you. As per the RIA Act of 2022, the grandfathering clause which is mentioned, which is what you're talking about, the September 2026 deadline. So it calls for a lot of things which are audited on the developer and the regional center side. So do we have anything which tells us as investors that those audits which have been enacted in 2022 have been actually done by the regional center or not? Yes. Right, that's point number one. Point number two is, the risk of audit on my side, since we are doing a LP-GP structure, that is primarily on the LP side because the GP, like in my case, the GP is going to be you. And I'm investing in a SPV with you, not directly into the project, right?
Exactly. So. Yes. So the RIA, the Reform and Integrity Act of 2022, now required, or when it was passed, started requiring that investors perform annual audits if they use certain structures. They can also use third-party fund administrators. What I'll tell you about the audits is that CMB is unique. My company is unique in that we actually started auditing, self-auditing back in 2015 because we saw it as kind of the ultimate form of transparency. We've audited all of our partnerships since then, all of the statistics of all of our partnerships. So when you go in our exhibit hall and you see that we've worked with 6,700 investors and over 5,000 I-526 approvals, that's true, that's been audited. And we share those. And the regional centers that do perform audits should be sharing those. So when you see our audits, obviously you're not seeing the audit of a project, your prospective, a prospective project that you're investing into, but you are seeing the 93 projects that came before it that CMB took on. All the way starting back in our first project under the current kind of form of the EB5 industry back in like 2005, 2006. So you're going to see all of that. The regional center who's performing those should be sharing those with you. You should be able to ask questions. You should be able to point out inconsistencies where they exist. And that is critically important. And then along the way, you should be able to see reporting on the project that you've actually invested into. So when that project is then audited the year after you've invested into it, they should be sharing those audit reports with you to make sure that that one continues to pass all of its standards as well.
Yeah, but your history of 93 projects after this RIA 222 does not matter, because if in your current project, if you have a zoning problem, which is not there in the previous project.
So the projects before the RIA absolutely matter.
Okay.
Because it's the same program. By and large, it's the same.
I would also want to know about the LP and GP structure, if you could tell me that. The risking, when we are both into an SPV, so who carries that risk of, the project has actually catered to the RIA 2022 requirements or not?
Who carries the risk as to whether or not they qualify?
Because it's an SPV between you and me, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So in which you are the GP, I'm just putting capital.
You're a limited partner, right? So you'd be a limited partner in that SPE that we're talking about. And so you as an investor in that carry this risk. You have to be compliant with the Reform and Integrity Act of 22. So you do, I think I know what you're getting to, you do have to make sure that that regional center obviously is compliant. That's also a function of your immigration attorney when they're reviewing the project you're investing into. So that compliance should be based upon
GP's feedback, or I should have my own audit?
Both. You should be looking at the GP, you should be talking to the GP for sure. You should be talking to the regional center about what their history is, what their track record is. You should be looking at those third-party audit reports because they're coming from a true third party. And then you should be looking at kind of the function of that partnership moving forward. Obviously, when you're making your decision to invest into it, you are going to want to consult with your immigration attorney. Hey, what does this look like? Is it compliant? Is it structured, for success from an EB5 perspective? They might not give you advice from a business perspective, and that, not to get off track, but that's also an important thing you need to understand. When the projects are approved by USCIS, they're not approving it from a business perspective. They're not rubber stamping it and saying it's a great project. You do have to do that level of due diligence.
Well, hope that answers. Thanks so much, Matt. A gentleman there, please go ahead with your question.
So my daughter is in US and she is H1B and she has already got her petition of green card. But it is waiting for adjustment of status. So that will take a lot of time. But the thing is that they are married, and if she applies for the green card, now the thing is that this EB5, and for the source of funds, can I provide her, if I gift her the funds, will it be, my source will also be checked? I mean, I give it from a property sale to her, the funds. So, I can gift her the funds, or it has to be her own source?
No, the source of the funds can certainly be yours, but the immigration will want to see your source. For her, it's a simple source. It's a gift from a father to a daughter. But your source is what becomes critical. How did you buy the property? When did you buy the property? Document your purchase of the property. Document your sale of the property. All of that before you can gift it to her.
So property sale, I mean, I have got a registered deed. So
Well, I don't know how you bought the property. I don't know if you inherited the property. I don't know if you purchased multiple properties.
How long back are they tracking me? Like, I have got a property, 10-year-old property with
10 years old is very young. I've been asked to document a purchase from 1982. So that gives you an idea of how far back they can go. The burden of proof from the immigration perspective for EB5 is what we legally would call preponderance of the evidence. Means it doesn't have to be 100%. However, the immigration presently, like Matt said earlier, is being very strict in their adjudications and is asking or looking for almost 100%. I always shoot for 100% and then worry to see what's missing. When you tell me a property was bought 10 years ago and you cannot document it,
it is documented.
No, when you bought it, how you bought it, when did you get the money from?
So you need the papers. I think in that conversation, maybe we could take it offline if you
Yeah,
have
sure.
any
But it
specifics.
seems to me, what I said earlier, where it's like, I don't want to get it, not that you cannot get it. Big difference.
So last question. I know all of you are really hungry and waiting for lunch, but we could take a last question if there is. There were a couple of hands. Yeah, there was a gentleman at the back. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I have few questions, if you can allow me 5 minutes before. Just for 5 minutes, huh?
So let's be quick. Let's take
All
one.
right, I'll be fast. I'll be very much fast. All right, somebody told that one investment will invite 10 jobs, right? in that EB5. I don't remember the name, but somebody of you told that, one investment of EB5 should invite 10 jobs. And my question is, what if the revenue drops of the company and layoffs becomes imminent? Will this watch the application or any alternatives are given?
Here, I can jump in on this and we can both kind of add to it. So that's a great question. And when we're talking about EB5, typically in the industry, we're talking about model-driven jobs. So the USCIS allows regional centers to use economic models to forecast job creation that will occur on a project as a result of spending. That's actually a model that's been used in the industry for years and years, but most regional centers now are using that and are relying only on those model-driven jobs. So if the project gets built and it spends all of the money on construction that it anticipated spending, you shouldn't have to worry about layoffs and things like that because you're not talking about actual employees that are working on site or working in the operations phase of a project. You're talking about model-driven jobs that are forecasted from spending. One thing I would be weary of is if you're looking at a project and they're saying, oh, we've got all this job creation, you're going to be really safe, you're going to have this huge buffer, I'd look at how they are counting the jobs. If they're simply reliant upon straightforward model-driven jobs, you're probably going to be a little bit more safe if they have protections in place to make sure the project gets fully built and the capital gets expended. But if they're over-leveraging jobs from operations phase, they're looking at actual workers that are going to be there to make sure that they can put enough EB5 in the project, that is something you really do have to be worried about because that's where you have a conflict of interest with the developer, right? If they build a project, they start its operations, but it's not successful and they need to lay off staff, an investor could get sent home if you don't create the 10 jobs.
All right, I got that. Thank you so much for this. And Rohit, I specifically liked your answer you just gave us that you should present 3 years of statement because that is required to check your overall financial profile. But my question is, what if the applicant got recent successes in terms of investments, or his business made a quick fortune, or his lands got acquired by the government, he wants to use those funds to finance his EB5. Will that be acceptable?
Yes. Not an issue with that as long as you can document. That happened a lot in places like Chandigarh, for example. The government took properties and paid big amounts of money, so that could certainly be used for EB5. In many companies, individuals get what are called stock options or RSUs. I have several clients who will use their RSUs for funding the EB5. That's really not a problem. I do want to clarify one thing that you just said. When I said bank statements for 3 years and tax returns for 7 years, that's the minimum, okay? That's not maximum. So they can always ask for more, which ties in with what the earlier gentleman asked when he said the property was bought 10 years ago. And I said that was a pretty young purchase because you can and you will be asked to go back further.
Right.
And I think for the third question, do you think you could take it offline, please? We're really running short of time.
Just one last question. I'm very much sure everybody will agree to that. Ma'am, just one question, just one quick question. I appreciate that we can answer that.
They're all here, so I think that
Well,
should...
I just wanted to ask that racism thing which is going on in US. How real is that for everybody? If that is answerable.
Repeat your question, please.
Well, anti-immigrants, atmosphere which is being created
I think
by
that's clearly not a subject of this panel.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I know
Sorry.
that. Right. All right. Thank you.
Well,
Appreciate
thank you
that.
so much for joining us today at the IREX 23rd edition of IREX 2025. It's really been a pleasure to have you all on.